My name is Eva, and I never imagined my own family would try to sell the home I built with my bare hands to buy my sister a new apartment. But when I found out, I didn't just defend my house. I planned the kind of revenge you don't see coming. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, let me ask, where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. Family dinners in my parents' suburban home had always been this weird combination of polite chatter and undercurrents of judgment. But that night, something was different. Maybe it was the way my mother's eyes darted toward Julia every few seconds, or the way my father kept checking his phone like he was waiting for someone to validate a secret. I wish I could tell you I saw it coming. The roast chicken was still warm, the wine half poured, when I caught the whisper. She won't even notice. We'll sell it, get Julia that apartment before the baby comes. That was my mother. Cold, matter of fact. I froze. Julia, the pregnant golden child. I was the older one, Eva, 29, homeowner, freelance photographer who took 2 years off college to work night shifts and save enough for a down payment on that little country house. A house I bought alone, fixed alone, painted alone. And here they were, my parents talking about selling it like it was theirs. I swallowed hard, set down my fork. I'm sorry, what did you just say? The silence hit like a slap. My father looked startled. Julia just blinked, wide-eyed, playing innocent, but my mother, she didn't even flinch. I said, she repeated, louder this time, Julia needs a real home now that the baby's coming. That place is too big for you anyway. It makes more sense to sell it and do something useful with the money. I was shaking. It's my house, she scoffed. Your sister is about to have a child, Eva. What do you have, a dog? You can sleep in the car if you're that attached to the countryside. I felt the floor drop from under me. Julia touched my arm gently, like I was a toddler being difficult. Eva, come on, don't be dramatic. You know I wouldn't ask if I didn't need it. I pulled away, my hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. You didn't ask, you schemed, behind my back. You weren't supposed to hear that. My father muttered under his breath, like that made it better. That was the moment. That precise second where something inside me snapped, not like a clean break, but like an old rope giving way under years of tension. The kind of snap that makes people do things they'd never considered before. I stood up slowly, letting my cloth napkin fall onto the plate with a deliberate, quiet sort of defiance. You're seriously going to take everything I've worked for and give it away just because she's having a baby? No one answered, so I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry, not then. I walked out into the cold, suburban evening, my breath visible, my body numb, my pride shattered. And as I drove away, hands trembling on the steering wheel, one question echoed through my mind like a drumbeat. What kind of family does this to their own? I didn't sleep that night. Not really. The silence of my country home, normally comforting, felt intrusive. Too loud. The way the floor creaked. The way the branches scratched against the window like they were trying to get in. My mind replayed every word from that dinner table like an ugly melody I couldn't shut off. I built this house with bruised knuckles and early mornings. I stained those beams myself, each with a memory. My first freelance paycheck. The time I slept on an air mattress for 6 months just to afford insulation. And now, my own mother was tossing it aside like a hand-me-down sweater. When the morning sun crept through the blinds, it found me on the couch, still in my coat, a cup of cold coffee untouched in my hands. And then, right on cue, the hum of tires on gravel. Julia. I watched through the front window as she stepped out of her car, dressed in soft beige and pastel blues like motherhood had already swallowed her whole. She knocked with that delicate rhythm people use when they don't want to be rejected. I opened the door, but only halfway. Hey, she said, her voice syrupy. Can I come in? I didn't answer, just turned and walked back toward the kitchen. She followed. The house smelled like cedar and burnt coffee. She glanced around like she was taking inventory. Her eyes paused on the wide-planked floors, the sun-warmed window seat, the wood stove I'd restored myself. I could almost hear her calculating. This place is really lovely, she said, running her hand over the back of the sofa. So cozy. What do you want, Julia? I said, keeping my voice even. She sighed as if she was the one under attack. Look, I know yesterday got heated. Heated, I repeated, arching an eyebrow. You were plotting to steal my home. She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I turned, arms crossed. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds exactly fair. Julia's tone shifted slightly, a practiced softness. I'm having a baby, Eva. Don't you remember what that was like? Oh, wait. That pause, that needle of cruelty wrapped in passive innocence. I stared at her. Say what you mean, Julia. Don't hide behind the baby bump. I didn't mean it like that. You never do. She sank into one of the armchairs, letting out a breath like we were two sisters just having a difficult talk, not a negotiation for my life. I'm just saying. You have this big house, and I'm about to start a family. It makes sense. You mean you want it to make sense, I replied. But it doesn't. It's not yours. It's not ours. It's mine. Her lips tightened. But wouldn't it be better to split the profits? We both get something. You could move into the city, have a fresh start. I smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile you give when you've been insulted and you're trying not to throw something. You know what I did while you were partying through college, Julia? I asked calmly. I worked doubles at a diner. I taught myself graphic design from a busted laptop. I built a portfolio from nothing. And I scraped enough money together, penny by penny, to buy this place. She didn't look at me. I leaned forward. Meanwhile, you were drinking overpriced cocktails in rooftop bars, calling mom to bail you out of rent, and changing boyfriends like socks. But sure, let's split the profits. Her expression hardened. You think you're so perfect. No, I said, standing tall. But I am done pretending I owe anyone for working hard. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Then, in a tone meant to sound defeated but sharp around the edges, Julia muttered, Fine, keep it. I watched her stand, gather her purse, and march to the door. She paused just before stepping out. But you'll regret this. They won't let it go. She slammed the door hard enough to shake the windows. I stood there for a long time, letting the dust settle and my breath even out. She thought that was the end of it. She had no idea what I was willing to do to protect what was mine. There's a strange silence that comes after someone tries to take everything from you and fails. Not the satisfying kind. The brittle, watch-your-back kind. It had been less than 24 hours since Julia stormed off, muttering that I'd regret this. The wind had picked up since then, brushing the last few yellow leaves from the porch. But inside, everything was still. Still enough that I could hear my own doubts settling in. Maybe they wouldn't stop. Maybe I'd be fighting this forever. I spent the morning cleaning, not because the place was dirty, but because scrubbing a countertop felt like something I could control. By the time I'd moved to reorganizing the pantry alphabetically, like a lunatic, I heard gravel crackling again. Of course, I didn't even have to look. Julia was back. She didn't knock this time. She just opened the door like it was hers, like she lived here. Like this house. The one I fought to keep heated through 2 winters was just a casual stop on her checklist. You're not answering your phone, she said, as if that were a crime. I don't want to talk to you. Well, tough, she snapped, stepping fully into the kitchen. Because this is bigger than you being stubborn. It's about our family, our future. She let the words hang there, dramatic and heavy. I leaned against the counter. You mean your future? You mean once again Eva makes the sacrifice so Julia gets what she wants? Her lip curled slightly. Why are you being like this? You mean rational, clear-eyed. Boundary setting. No, cold, selfish, I'm pregnant, Eva. I crossed my arms. Pregnant doesn't mean entitled. Julia exhaled loudly and started pacing. Okay, fine, maybe Mom and Dad shouldn't have said what they said at dinner. That was harsh. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the part where she told me I could sleep in my car? She avoided my eyes. They're just stressed. It's not like they have a lot of money either. And yet somehow you're the investment. Because I'm having a child. I need stability. I laughed, sharp and short. Stability? You've changed apartments 3 times in 2 years. You quit your last job because your manager gave you a weird vibe. You ghosted your landlord after flooding his laundry room. That was one time. Julia, I've been working since I was 16. I saved every tip from waitressing, edited weddings, and hotel lobbies just to get better internet, fixed this place with my own hands, and now I'm supposed to just hand it over. Her face flushed. I'm offering a compromise. Sell it, split the profits. You can get a condo in the city close to your clients. I narrowed my eyes. No, what you're offering is robbery with a smile. Silence. Then her voice cracked a bit, trying the softer angle. Eva, come on, we're sisters. I looked at her for a long moment. You're not my sister right now. You're a buyer who came in without an invitation. Her expression hardened. You don't get it. If I don't get this place, they'll cut me off. They're putting everything into this apartment. My stomach turned. So they're blackmailing you too. They're not. They just said if I want their help, this is how it has to go. I stared at her, the reality setting in. They weren't just using her to pressure me. They were using me to pressure her. Julia was the pawn, and I was the prize. It should have made me feel sorry for her, but instead I felt fury. You know what? I said slowly. If you had come here and said, I'm scared, Eva. I don't know what I'm doing and I need your help. Maybe we could have had a conversation, but you didn't. You came here with a pitch. She blinked. You came here with numbers, charm, and guilt as your weapons. Eva, don't. You've been carried your whole life, Julia. You wouldn't know hard work if it slapped you. And now you want to rob the one person who did the work because you think it's convenient. Julia's voice rose. You think you're better than me. No, I know I worked harder than you. Her fists clenched at her sides. You didn't earn love, Eva. You just earned a mortgage. That one stung, more than I expected. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I took a step forward and said something I hadn't planned but meant with every fiber of my being. And you know what? I'd rather have a mortgage than a family who trades daughters like assets. She backed toward the door, fury flashing across her face. You'll regret this, she said again, but her voice was shakier now, less certain. Like maybe, for the first time, she realized I wouldn't fold. The door slammed behind her, but the silence it left behind didn't scare me this time. It felt like armor. That night I couldn't sit still. Not from fear, not anymore. It was something else now, something tighter, clearer. A click in the back of my mind that felt almost mechanical. The realization that this wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about control, about leverage, about staying one move ahead in a game I never agreed to play but now had no choice but to win. I walked through the house barefoot, slow, almost reverent. Each floorboard creak felt like a goodbye, or maybe a warning. The fireplace crackled softly, throwing flickers of gold across the wooden beams I'd stained myself just 3 winters ago. The pine I'd sanded until my hands blistered. The windows I'd replaced with my own savings, one pane at a time. And yet all of that, the sweat, the memory, the personal history, wasn't armor anymore. It was a target. I stopped in the kitchen. The mug from this morning still sat in the sink, the coffee stain drying in a soft crescent at the bottom. I stared at it, wondering how many mornings like this I thought I had left here. They weren't going to stop, were they? Not Julia, not my parents, not after how far they'd already pushed. They dressed up theft as sacrifice, packaged manipulation as care. And worse, they thought I was too emotionally attached to see it. You can sleep in the car, my mother had said. I gripped the edge of the sink. It wasn't just the words. It was the ease with which she'd said them. The coldness. Like my comfort, my stability didn't even register, like I was optional. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of prying this house from my grip. But maybe, just maybe, I could give it up on my terms. And that's when the idea crystallized. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. If this house was the battlefield, then letting go first meant denying them the war. I walked back to the living room, the moonlight slick on the hardwood floor like a warning. I sat down on the couch, legs tucked under me, heart pounding with the certainty that I was about to cross a line, and that I wouldn't come back the same. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found her name. Michelle Barris, real estate agent, mid-30s, sharp as nails, and one of the only people I knew who'd once said to me, if you ever need to sell fast, call me first. I don't ask questions. So I did. Eva, she answered after 2 rings. Everything okay? I need a private listing, I said. No sign in the yard, no gossip, just results. You're selling the house, she asked, surprised. The one you... Yes, I want it clean, no strings, no family touching any part of it. Michelle paused. Eva, are you sure this isn't? It's not emotional, it's survival. That silenced her for a moment. I can be there first thing in the morning, she said. We'll stage just enough to attract the right eyes and keep it tight, you picking the buyer. Every step of the way, I confirmed. I don't care if I lose 5-10 grand, I want it fast, final, no room for interference. What's the urgency? They're coming, I said simply. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but I know them. They're planning something, and I won't be here when they do. She sighed, the kind of sigh professionals do before they suit up for a job that's personal. Okay, I'll draw up everything tonight. We'll keep it off the MLS until you're ready." After I hung up, I sat in the glow of the fireplace, watching shadows stretch across the wood grain. I imagined what they'd say when they found out. My mother scoffing, my father silent as always, Julia shrieking about betrayal. But this wasn't betrayal, it was defense. For the first time since the dinner ambush, I felt light. I still had no idea where I'd go, what came after, but I had my agency, and they couldn't take what I'd already let go. I stood, walked to the front door, and stepped outside. The cold nipped at my skin, but I welcomed it. The stars were unusually clear. The kind of night where breath curls visibly in the air and the quiet wraps around you like a blanket and a warning all at once. I didn't know what the next week would bring. But I knew one thing for sure. If they wanted a fight, they'd have to chase me to find it. 2 days after I made the call, I left the country behind. I didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. The house felt less like a home and more like a chessboard I was walking away from. Mid-match, yes, but only because I already knew the outcome. Michelle moved fast. She always did. We staged the house with a few neutral pieces, took photos under perfect lighting, and kept the listing off the grid. Private network only. She told me not to worry about interest. Homes like this, with character and clean ownership, they draw the right eyes fast. I smiled at that, clean ownership. The words felt like armor. The downtown apartment I found wasn't glamorous, but it didn't have to be. It was temporary. Short-term lease, top floor, no family in a 100-mile radius. Just me, a wall of windows, and the low hum of traffic below. City noise is different than silence. It doesn't taunt you the way countryside quiet can. It fills your brain with white sound, letting your thoughts soften at the edges. I could sleep here without wondering who might knock. I unpacked only the essentials: laptop, camera, notebooks, the hand-carved bowl I kept my keys in. Everything else stayed boxed. I wasn't building roots yet, just pressing pause. On my first night in the apartment, I stood by the window and looked out at the skyline. Dozens of windows lit like tiny stages. People in their own little lives, none of them wondering what it feels like to be told your home is a transaction. I whispered it aloud just to make it real. "No one gets to decide where I sleep." I meant it, every word. The next morning came with coffee and quiet. I sat cross-legged on the rug, no furniture yet, sipping from the same mug I used the day I realized Julia would never see me as her equal. It had a crack down the handle now. I didn't care. It still held heat. I checked my phone for messages, not from them, but from Michelle. 2 interested parties already, one from out of state, one local couple. I typed back, "Let's set a walkthrough date. End of week, I'll meet them." I needed to be there, not to defend the house, but to choose its next owner. Carefully. And yet, even in this moment of quiet victory, my stomach tightened every time my phone buzzed. I still hadn't unblocked anyone, but my fingers hovered over Julia's contact more than once. What would she say if she knew I was already gone? Would she still call me selfish? Would she finally understand that this wasn't about her? I didn't want an apology anymore. I wanted distance. And the city was giving me just that. I walked through the apartment, mapping out corners, measuring sunlight. It was small but high up, 6 stories between me and anyone else's opinions. I hung nothing on the walls. I wasn't decorating. I was detoxing. That evening, I walked the block to a tiny grocery store. Bought lemons, ginger, a loaf of rye bread still warm from the oven. The cashier smiled like she didn't know a thing about me, which felt like a gift. Back home, I boiled water and lit a candle. No family voices. No echoes, just quiet, the good kind this time. And yet I stayed alert. Like the battle had gone silent, not ended. Like something was watching or planning. But for now, I was safe. I was unlisted, unreachable, unbroken. 3 days later, I was back at the country house. Not as a daughter, not even as a homeowner, really. I was there as a seller. Michelle had arranged the walkthroughs quietly, staggered. One buyer at a time. No frenzy, no open houses, just a single afternoon, a few serious candidates, and a firm deadline. The local couple canceled last minute. Their financing fell through. But the second one, the out-of-towner, arrived 10 minutes early. His name was Daniel Bishop. Mid-40s, pressed jeans, brown suede boots. He pulled up in a sensible silver sedan and stepped out like someone who had nothing to prove. He took one look at the house and smiled, not the kind that said, "Wow, profit," but the kind that said finally. I met him on the porch. "You must be Eva," he said, offering his hand. I nodded. "And you must be Daniel." We shook. He glanced around. "It's even better in person, clean lines, solid structure. The kind of house you don't see on the market much anymore." He didn't try to flatter me. He didn't ask personal questions. He just stepped inside like someone who respected space and stories. We toured the house room by room. He asked thoughtful questions. Wiring, roofing, insulation. When we stepped into the kitchen, he paused beside the old wooden island I'd refinished last spring. "You did this yourself?" "Every inch." He nodded, running his fingers lightly over the grain. "You can tell." He wasn't looking at the kitchen like a man shopping for counters. He was looking like a man measuring stillness, maybe even grief. "Why are you selling?" he asked softly. I hesitated, then told the truth. "To protect it." His brow furrowed. He didn't press. "I don't want to delay anything," I said, changing the subject. "If you're serious, I need a clean deal, no back and forth, no complications, no surprises at closing." Daniel met my eyes. "I don't like surprises either." We finished the tour in silence. Back on the porch, coffee cups in hand, Michelle had suggested refreshments, and I'd gone for something simple. Strong black coffee in white mugs, the kind you could grip without thinking. We talked terms. He offered slightly below asking. I countered once. He accepted, just like that, no fuss, no haggling. I leaned back against the porch rail as he signed the preliminary documents. When he passed the clipboard back, he smiled again, wider this time. "I'm not just buying a house," he said. "I'm buying peace." I nodded, quietly moved by how much that mirrored my own feelings, only in reverse. He was entering peace. I was leaving it behind. "I'll have the final paperwork ready in 3 days," Michelle said, scribbling notes beside us. "Keys exchange by Friday." Daniel turned to me. "Would you mind if I brought my daughter by this weekend? She's 20, studying art. I think she'll love this place." There was something about the way he said "my daughter" that made me pause. Gentle, proud, like he knew how rare it was for a father to say it with weight. "Of course," I said. When he left, the wind picked up slightly. I stood alone on the porch as the last of the leaves skipped across the gravel drive. It should have felt like an ending. But instead, it felt like a hand closing a door before locking it, on my terms. The city had a rhythm, and for the first time in weeks, I'd begun to move with it. Mornings with thick coffee and half-unpacked boxes. Evenings with my feet tucked under me on the sofa, watching life roll past my window in red tail lights and passing laughter. I wasn't healed, not by any stretch, but I was. Still. And after everything, stillness felt like a kind of miracle. I slept through the night for the first time since the family dinner. My phone stopped vibrating with guilt-laced text storms. The house sale was in motion, and Daniel was set to sign closing paperwork by Friday. Everything, for once, was lining up. Until Tuesday morning when my phone rang. No caller ID, just the vibration that jerked me out of sleep with that old, familiar dread. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said, "Pick up." I answered, barely awake. "Eva," my father's voice. Cold, direct, I sat upright. "What do you want?" "Come to the country house, now." There was no hello, no preamble, no apology, just that one clipped sentence. I blinked. "Excuse me. You need to come see what's happened, before you sign anything." "What are you talking about?" "I'm not saying it over the phone." I could hear it in his tone, anger, but also fear. Urgency. Then, before I could respond, he hung up. No explanation, no details, just the order. I stared at the screen, pulse suddenly pounding. The city hum that had soothed me all week felt too loud now, like it was mocking the brief calm I dared to believe in. Why now? Had he gone to the house? Was he even allowed? A sick knot began forming in my stomach. I threw on jeans and a jacket, my hands clumsy as I tied my boots. My keys were already in my hand before I fully processed what I was doing. Halfway to the car, I paused. "Don't go," my instinct whispered. But I had to. If there was damage, if they'd crossed a line, I needed to know now, before the sale closed, before it was too late. The drive felt longer than it was. Every familiar turn now seemed sinister, every shadow on the road like a premonition. I replayed the conversation again and again, but it gave me nothing. No hint, no clue, just that sentence, "Come to the house." Now, when I turned onto the long gravel driveway, I saw Daniel's car first. That set my nerves on fire. Why was he there? He was supposed to be in the city. We weren't due to meet again until closing. Did Michelle call him? Had something happened with the sale? I pulled in slowly, bracing myself. Daniel was standing at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed tightly, his face pale. Next to him, a man I didn't recognize, mid-30s, beard, uniformed. Security. Daniel walked toward me before I could even kill the engine. "They broke the door," he said flatly. I blinked. "What?" "Front door, frames cracked, deadbolt kicked in, looked like they used a crowbar." My stomach dropped. "Who?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He didn't reply, just pulled out his phone and opened a video. The security footage played on screen. My parents. My father, crowbar in hand, prying the door like a burglar. My mother, right behind him, holding something I couldn't make out. Julia wasn't visible, but I didn't need to see her to know this was a family operation. Daniel watched me carefully as the footage ended. "The police were called automatically," he said. "New system triggered by the breach. They're being charged." I couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. "They thought it was empty," he added. "Didn't realize I'd scheduled a walkthrough this morning for another buyer, just as backup. My guy arrived early, found them." What did they say?" I managed to whisper. Daniel's voice was ice. "Your father shouted, 'This is still family property,' while the cops were cuffing him." A bitter laugh escaped me, dry and broken. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Daniel continued. "They brought tools, gloves, they came to sabotage." I stood there, rooted to the spot, wind slicing across my skin. The porch. The walls, the beams, everything I'd built violated. Again, but this time they didn't just try to steal it. They tried to destroy it. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 15. Long enough for the cold to start crawling under my jacket and settling in my bones. Daniel didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The damage spoke for itself. We walked toward the house together, his footsteps heavy beside mine. The broken front door hung slightly ajar, its lock twisted, the frame split clean through like kindling. The brass knob I had polished last winter was dented, tilted like it had tried to resist and failed. Inside, the living room was a mess. Not trashed, but disrupted. A drawer pulled open. A lamp knocked over. A vase cracked at the base and listing to one side, its one straight bouquet now sagging like it had wilted from the shock. I swallowed hard. Daniel pointed toward the hallway camera, one I'd forgotten was still wired to the backup cloud system. "I already sent the footage to the police," he said. "Your friend Michelle confirmed ownership, everything's airtight." He looked at me gently. "They can't talk their way out of this." I nodded, still unable to speak. The walls felt closer now. The house, my house, no longer felt like shelter. It felt violated, not just structurally, but spiritually. Every nail I'd hammered, every floorboard I'd cleaned on my hands and knees, now held their fingerprints. I leaned against the wall just for a second. Daniel's voice softened. "They've been charged with trespassing and attempted property damage. Your dad was shouting the whole time that it wasn't a crime because this was still family property." Of course he was. That phrase echoed in my mind like a curse. Still family property. Not hers. Not earned. Not protected. Family, like blood was a deed. I shook my head, tears stinging behind my eyes. "They thought they could destroy it before I sold it," I whispered. Daniel didn't answer, just let the truth settle. "I gave them every chance to walk away with dignity," I said, my voice rising with disbelief. "I gave them 30 days, I didn't shame them, I didn't press charges the first time, and this is what I get." Daniel took a slow step closer. "You remind me of my daughter, strong, stubborn. When people see that, they either respect it or try to crush it." I looked at him. His tone had changed, less formal, more protective. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document, the police report from this morning, already signed and filed. "I'm not pressing charges either," he said gently. But they needed to feel it. We stood in silence together, side by side in the heart of the ruined house. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry, not loud, not broken, just a few quiet tears for what had been done. For what had been taken and twisted and turned into a battlefield. Daniel rested a hand lightly on my shoulder, not invasive, just present. And when I finally spoke, my voice was clear. "They'll never forgive me." "Maybe not," he said. "And maybe," I added, "I won't forgive them either." We sat on the porch for a long while after the police cars drove off. Daniel beside me. The same man who, until last week, was just a name in an email thread. The porch light buzzed softly above us. A moth danced against the bulb. I watched it, not really seeing. My hands trembled around the ceramic mug Daniel had placed in them. Hot tea, strong and unsweetened. The way I liked it. The way I hadn't told him I liked it. "You ever feel like you were born into the wrong family?" I asked suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just let the silence stretch like it belonged. Then he said, "I think sometimes the family we're born into just doesn't know what to do with the strength we're born with." I swallowed, the heat of the tea warming me from the inside, but not enough to shake the ache out of my chest. "They'll never forgive me," I said, staring into the night. "And maybe I won't forgive them either." "You don't have to," he replied. "Forgiveness is overrated when it's used to excuse people who would hurt you again in a heartbeat." I turned my head. "Even if they're your parents. Especially if they're your parents." That's when the tears came, silent and slow, no sobbing, no shaking, just the kind of tears that had waited too long to be seen. Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't touch me. Just sat there, steady as stone, letting me fall apart like it was the most natural thing in the world. That moment, oddly enough, felt more like family than anything I'd experienced in years. He left quietly after that. "Call me if anything changes," he said. "I'll be around." And just like that, I was alone again, but not in the same way. This time I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen by myself. For 2 days I lived in rare peace. Back in the apartment, I lit candles, cooked pasta from scratch, even opened my old sketchbook. I slept. Ate, existed without fear. The closing date was approaching, and Michelle confirmed the paperwork was smooth. Daniel was ready. So was I until I wasn't, until it all exploded. It started with a friend from high school sending me a DM. "Hey, what's going on with your sister's post? Are you okay?" I stared at the message, confused. My stomach sank as I opened Facebook. Yes, I still had it, mostly to keep tabs on hometown drama, and there it was, Julia's post. "Kicked out by my own sister while pregnant. Left with nowhere to go. Some people care more about money than family." There she was, sitting on a suitcase in front of our childhood home, crying for the camera like a character in a soap opera. The caption, "Emotional bait steeped in manipulation." All I wanted was a roof over my baby's head. She chose a stranger over blood. The comment section was a wildfire. "She should be ashamed." "Disgusting, I'd never do that to my sister." "Wait until karma hits her." They didn't even know me. Didn't know about the broken door, the crowbar, the police. Didn't know about the sacrifices. The years I worked double shifts so Julia could party her 20s away. The inheritance I gave up so they could have their perfect family unit. They didn't care. She'd made herself the victim, and I was just a name they could throw rocks at from their safe little screens. My phone exploded. Voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. Friends tagging me in comments. Distant cousins I hadn't seen in a decade, suddenly preaching forgiveness and unity. Even a message from Mark, Julia's husband. "Eva, please call her. She's not well. This is tearing her up." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I blocked them all, one by one. That night I sat on the kitchen floor with a glass of wine and the police report spread out in front of me like some kind of protection spell. I reread every line, every timestamp, every proof that what happened was real. And for the first time I said it out loud. "I'm not the villain." And I meant it. Not because I needed reassurance, but because I'd earned the right to stop defending myself against lies. They wanted me broken, embarrassed, silenced. But I wasn't going to apologize for refusing to be used. The quiet didn't last. I think a part of me hoped it would. That after Julia's little PR stunt online, after the swarm of messages and backhanded concern from people who hadn't called me in years, they'd all just burn out and move on. But toxic people don't stop when you walk away. They chase. And eventually, they kick down the last door you thought was safe. It happened on a Thursday night. Rain was falling in lazy, steady sheets against the windows of my downtown apartment. I was curled up on the couch in sweats, watching some throwback detective show from the 90s. I just started to feel the fog lift, those days of fury and disbelief finally melting into something closer to clarity. Then my buzzer rang. Not the front door knock. The buzzer, the sound of someone too impatient to wait, slamming the call button like it owed them something. I stood slowly, walked to the panel. "Hello?" Nothing, then a voice. One I hadn't heard since the arrest, my father's. "Open the door, Eva." Cold, sharp, controlled. Every instinct in my body screamed, "Don't." "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice tight. "You know why. You've destroyed this family." "I'm calling the police." "You won't." His tone was low, dangerous. "Because that would make this permanent." "And you don't want permanent, do you?" I didn't answer. He buzzed again and again. The shrill sound echoed through the apartment like a warning siren, then nothing. Silence. I exhaled, stepped away, then bang, a loud crash. I ran to the peephole just in time to see him. He'd gotten into the building, God knows how. Maybe someone buzzed him in by accident, maybe he followed a tenant. But he was at my door now, pounding his fist into the wood. "You ruined everything," he roared. "You selfish, ungrateful." I stepped back instinctively. My phone was already in my hand, my thumb on 911. "I told you," I said loud enough for him to hear through the door, "if you came near me again, I'd make it stick." He didn't stop. His hand slammed into the door again. "You think this little apartment makes you better than us? You think money makes you right?" "No," I said calmly, "but police reports do." The pounding stopped. Then sirens, faint but growing. He must have heard them too, because the yelling stopped instantly. For a moment all I heard was breathing, heavy, ragged, then retreating footsteps. When the police arrived minutes later, I was shaking. I could barely get the words out to the officer. They didn't need much. They already had the history, the reports, the footage. This time, he wasn't leaving with a warning. They found him 2 blocks away, soaked to the bone and still fuming. Arrested on the spot for trespassing, attempted break-in, and violating a protection order I'd filed after the last incident. The neighbors watched. I saw them peeking through blinds, standing in cracked doorways. No one said anything to me that night, but the silence was louder than judgment. I didn't sleep. Not really. Just lay in bed, listening to the city, trying to convince myself that this was just the last gasp of their campaign to control me, that I'd finally cut the final cord. But part of me knew better, because this wasn't about a house anymore. This was about me, my refusal to obey, my decision to live for myself, my insistence that family does not mean ownership. And in their eyes, that was unforgivable. 3 days passed after the arrest. 3 days of tight-lipped silence from the outside world, broken only by the occasional lawyer's voicemail and one half-hearted apology email from Julia that began with, "I'm sorry you feel hurt." 3 days of replaying every moment, my father's fists on the door, the neighbor's eyes, the disbelief that this was what family could become. And then, just as I'd started to breathe again, someone knocked. Not a bang, not a threat, just a knock, cautious, almost respectful. I froze, checked the peephole. It was Mark, Julia's husband. I hadn't seen him since the baby shower they forced me to help pay for. I remembered him mostly as a background character, quiet, agreeable, never really inserting himself into the family wars. But now here he was, standing alone in a soaked hoodie, a man with nothing rehearsed in his posture, just bone-deep exhaustion. I opened the door a crack. "What are you doing here?" His eyes met mine, red-rimmed, honest. "We're drowning," he said, no preamble, no attempt to ease in. I didn't speak, just listened. "I'm working double shifts. Julia's not sleeping." "She's scared all the time," he continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "And what she did to you, what they all did, it wasn't okay, I know that, but I also know she's pregnant, Eva, and I can't keep us afloat much longer." He looked down, voice breaking. "I thought we'd have help, I thought your parents would come through, but they're too busy trying to prove they were right." I leaned against the doorframe. I didn't owe him anything, but I also didn't feel the familiar anger rise. Just something different, colder, cleaner, clarity. "You came here to ask me for money," I said flatly. He shook his head. "No, I came to ask you if there's any part of you left that still wants to protect that baby. Not them, her, because she's coming whether they deserve her or not." That's when I exhaled, slowly, like something long frozen in me was finally cracking. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked past him, out into the rain-slicked street, and pictured a baby, tiny, innocent, untouched by the selfishness of her family. She hadn't asked for any of this, but she would live in the wreckage if I didn't do something now. I'll buy a place, I said, my voice firm. Mark blinked, unsure if he heard me right. A place for the baby, I continued. Not for Julia, not for my parents, and not under anyone else's name. He stared. You would really do that? Yes. But it will be in the baby's name. A trust. She owns it from birth. No one can sell it, no one can touch it, and no one will know the address except you and me. He looked like he wanted to cry. I can't have children, I added quietly. Doctors told me last year I didn't tell anyone, didn't want the pity. Mark's face fell, stricken. But that baby, I said, finally letting a tear fall, just one. She deserves better than the people raising her. And maybe this is the only way I can help. Not them, her. Mark nodded. No arguments, no drama, just a man who'd come to beg and found an answer he didn't deserve. You've done more for her than anyone else ever will, he said. And for the first time in weeks my chest felt light, not happy, not safe, but clean. Like revenge didn't have to look like fire. Sometimes it could look like a deed signed in a baby's name. The apartment was small, nothing fancy. Just a modest 2-bedroom on a quiet street in a town an hour away from the chaos. A place with good schools, a swing set in the courtyard, and neighbors who smiled at each other in the hallway. Exactly what a little girl would need. I toured it alone. The agent, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, tried to sell me on granite counters and updated fixtures. I barely listened. I wasn't buying for aesthetics. I was buying safety. A sanctuary, walls that no one could weaponize. When I handed over the down payment, I felt no excitement. No pride, just relief. This wasn't revenge, this was insurance. I made it clear to the lawyer the property would be registered under a trust in the name of baby girl Donovan, with Mark as the designated trustee until she turned 18. No clauses. No contingencies. If they tried to contest it, they'd find nothing to fight over. Julia couldn't sell it. My parents couldn't touch it. Not one signature would be theirs. This home would belong to a child who didn't yet have a voice. But now she'd have a place where she could grow one. Mark met me outside the apartment a few days later, holding a box of baby clothes in one arm and his gratitude in both eyes. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Don't say anything, I replied. Just protect her. He nodded, voice cracking. I will. As we stood in the hallway, the paperwork still warm in our hands, he said, Julia doesn't know I came to you. She wouldn't understand. I don't need her to, I said. Then, for the first time, I looked him in the eye and said the thing I'd been holding onto for years. I wanted a child, Mark. I tried. I failed. And then they looked at me like I was less than, like I was incomplete. Julia threw it in my face once during an argument, said maybe that's why I clung to the house, because I had nothing else to pass on. Mark's face twisted. I'm sorry, I didn't know. No one ever does, I replied. I took a breath. But now, I do have something to pass on, not to her, but to her daughter. He didn't speak, just pressed the box into my hands and whispered, You'll always be part of her story, whether they admit it or not. I didn't tell anyone else, not even Daniel, not Michelle. It wasn't for social media. It wasn't for forgiveness. It was for the girl who'd be born into a war she never asked for. Because maybe, just maybe, one kind act could interrupt a cycle. Maybe love didn't always look like staying. Maybe it looked like walking away, but leaving a light on. 6 years later, the neighborhood hadn't changed much. The trees lining the street had grown fuller, leaves brushing gently against the fences like old friends. The paint on the apartment buildings had faded just a little, sun-warmed and weathered, but the sidewalk was still clean. The laughter of children still floated through the air, and the small courtyard was still guarded by its familiar swing set. I stood across the street, watching for a few seconds before I rang the bell. The same apartment I'd bought in silence. The same door Mark had walked through carrying a box of tiny onesies, 6 years younger and a lifetime more hopeful. Now a little girl opened it. She had wild auburn curls and sharp eyes that reminded me of no one because they were her own. Unclaimed by the past, bright and curious and new, she blinked up at me. Hi, she said. Are you the flower lady? I smiled. I brought flowers, so maybe I am today. She giggled and let me in. Mark was in the kitchen. He looked older, lines deeper, shoulders heavier, but when he saw me, he smiled like the years hadn't stretched between us. Eva, he said, stepping forward with quiet warmth. The apartment felt lived in now. Toys scattered across the rug, crayons in a tin. A drawing taped to the fridge with a shaky label, My Home. "Where's Julia?" I asked. Mark's smile dimmed. "She left last year," he said simply. "Said she needed space, didn't come back." I nodded. No judgment, no satisfaction, just understanding. Some people never learned, some wounds never closed. But the girl, the one now tugging on my sleeve and pulling me toward the living room, she was different. She was what remained when the fire burned out. We sat together on the couch, and she proudly introduced her dolls, her books, her favorite pillow. "This one's named Tiger," she told me, holding up a stuffed orange blur. "Protects me from bad dreams." "That's a very important job," I said, smiling. Then she asked it, so casual, so innocent. "Daddy said this place is mine. Is it true?" I turned to look at her, those wide, trusting eyes, that unbreakable softness. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, "it's yours." "Because of you," I nodded. "Why?" My throat tightened. I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "Because everyone needs one person who'll protect them," I said. "Even when it's hard, even when no one else does." She studied me for a second, the way children do when they're deciding if they believe you. Then she threw her arms around my neck and whispered, "You can come visit anytime. Tiger says so too." I laughed through the tears. Mark watched from the hallway, eyes glistening. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. That afternoon, we had lemonade on the balcony while the sun dipped low. She danced around us, singing to her doll, completely unaware that the walls she lived in had once been battlegrounds. That was the point. The past had stopped with me. She wouldn't have to inherit it. She'd inherit something else instead. Stability. Safety. A home where no one shouted through doors or kicked in locks. Just a place with warm rooms, crayons, and swings that never stopped squeaking. So many people think strength is about holding on. But sometimes it's about letting go and choosing not to repeat what broke you. Have you ever done something for someone who may never know the full story? If this story moved you, tell me where you're watching from. Share it with someone who's had to make hard choices for peace. And remember, you don't have to be born into a good family to become the beginning of one.